The story of Scotland, a rugged land of mountains, lochs, and stormy seas, is the story of a people shaped by hardship, by struggle, and by an unyielding spirit that forged one of the fiercest nations in history. For long before castles crowned its hills and clans rallied to their banners, this land was inhabited by ancient peoples whose lives were bound to its unforgiving landscapes. The earliest known settlers, arriving thousands of years ago, left behind stone monuments like those at Skara Brae in Orkney, standing stones that still whisper of forgotten rituals. Yet it was the Celtic tribes, arriving from Europe, who would give Scotland much of its early identity, bringing languages, traditions, and warrior culture that would define the Highland clans. Among these peoples were the Picts, whose painted bodies and mysterious symbols so terrified the Romans that when the empire expanded into Britain, they built Hadrian's Wall around 120 CE to keep them out. For while Rome conquered much of Britain, Scotland resisted. Roman legions marched north, building forts and roads, yet they never fully subdued the land, instead withdrawing behind their great wall, leaving the tribes of Caledonia fiercely independent. Over the centuries, waves of settlers came, including the Gaels from Ireland, who brought the Gaelic language blending with Pictish and Brittonic traditions to form a unique culture. By the early medieval period, Scotland was a patchwork of kingdoms, among them Dal Riata, Strathclyde, and Pictland, gradually uniting under one banner. By the 9th century, Kenneth MacAlpin emerged as a pivotal figure, often credited with founding the Kingdom of Alba, uniting Picts and Scots, and laying the foundation for medieval Scotland. Yet unity did not bring peace, for the land was threatened by Norse invaders. Vikings raided and settled along the coasts and islands from Orkney to the Hebrides, leaving behind a legacy of intermarriage and fierce maritime traditions. Scottish kings, such as Malcolm II and Duncan I, fought to defend their realm, while powerful earls like those of Orkney ruled semi-independently. The struggle for survival hardened the Scots, fostering a warrior ethos tied to kinship and loyalty. But it was in the late 13th and early 14th centuries that Scotland's reputation for fierceness was truly forged. When the Wars of Independence erupted against England, Edward I of England, known as the Hammer of the Scots, sought to bring the northern kingdom under his control, installing puppet rulers and garrisons. But resistance rose, first with William Wallace, who, though born a minor noble, became a national hero. In 1297, at the Battle of Stirling Bridge, he and Andrew Murray used clever tactics to rout a much larger English army, proving that Scotland would not bow easily, though Wallace was eventually captured and brutally executed. His defiance lit a fire that could not be extinguished. The cause was taken up by Robert the Bruce, who, after years of struggle, exile, and guerrilla warfare, achieved the decisive victory at the Battle of Bannockburn in 1314, where his vastly outnumbered army crushed Edward II's forces, securing Scotland's independence. The Declaration of Arbroath in 1320 declared Scotland's sovereignty, stating that as long as 100 men remained alive, they would never submit to English rule. This spirit of fierce independence became the heartbeat of the nation. Yet Scotland's history was far from peaceful. Internal clan rivalries, dynastic struggles, and battles with England continued for centuries. The Stuart dynasty rose, giving Scotland monarchs who balanced ambition and turmoil. Mary, Queen of Scots, became one of the most tragic figures, her turbulent reign ending in imprisonment and execution. But her son James VI inherited both the Scottish and English crowns in 1603, uniting them in the Union of the Crowns. Though the nations remained distinct, still, the Scots clung to their identity, their clans and traditions remaining strong. In the Highlands, clans like the MacDonalds, Campbells, and MacGregors became legendary, known for their fierce loyalty, their tartans, and their feuds, bound by honor and kinship. They lived by the sword and the code of hospitality. Yet their world was shaken by the Jacobite risings of the 17th and 18th centuries, when supporters of the exiled Stuart dynasty sought to restore them to the throne. The most famous rising came in 1745, led by Charles Edward Stuart, Bonnie Prince Charlie, who inspired Highland clans to march south in a daring attempt to reclaim the crown. Though at first successful, his campaign ended in disaster at the Battle of Culloden in 1746, where government forces crushed the Jacobites, leading to brutal reprisals. the banning of tartans and bagpipes, and the dismantling of the clan system. Still, even in defeat, the legend of the Highland warriors, their bravery, and their fierce resistance became woven into Scotland's identity. But Scotland's fierceness was not only in battle, it was also in the mind, for during the 18th century the Scottish Enlightenment flourished, producing thinkers like David Hume, Adam Smith, and James Watt, whose ideas in philosophy, economics, and industry transformed the modern world, showing that the Scottish spirit was as fierce in intellect as it was in arms. In the 19th and 20th centuries, Scotland contributed soldiers, engineers, and inventors to the British Empire, from the kilted Highland regiments who fought with unmatched valor in wars across the globe, to the shipbuilders of Glasgow who launched vessels that spanned oceans. The reputation of Scots as resilient, courageous, and inventive spread worldwide. Today, Scotland remains proud of its heritage, its culture of music, dance, and storytelling, its enduring symbols like the thistle and the bagpipes, its tartans and Highland games, and above all, its history of resistance and resilience. A land that stood against empires, birthed ideas that changed the world, and nurtured a people whose fierceness lay not just in war, but in their determination to remain themselves. The story of Scotland is thus the story of a nation forged in hardship, defined by independence, and remembered for a spirit that no conqueror could ever fully extinguish, a spirit that echoes in every glen, every loch, every song, and every heart that calls itself Scottish.